about nothing.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the March 8th meeting of the Conestoga Valley School Board and recognize that all are attended except for Mr. Talley and Mr. Smooker at this point. So if you could please join me with the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, welcome everyone here that's in the room and everyone that's watching online, if there are any watching online. Board, I need a motion to approve our agenda tonight.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Dr. Z, any comments from you tonight?
Yes, sir, I do. You'll notice one change from Friday's. How about Friday's posted agenda? We've removed the budget update item that listed the ESSER 2.0 as the sole information line. We've not received final numbers of the federal COVID relief funds from the state and how they'll impact the state and school districts, but more information to follow on that. So that will be maybe a next month's update. With the state's recent announcement to vaccinate educators with the single-dose Johnson & Johnson vaccines this month, the logistics have been left to the local districts and IUs. Brian Barnhart, the IU director, has been doing a great job trying to facilitate the state's gyrations with the rollout. As the dust continues to settle, we have developed a local plan that allows us to follow the state's recommended prioritization of vaccine distribution, focusing primarily on special education and English language learner personnel, followed by our elementary folks. The state had wanted bus drivers to be considered as well, but that is primarily for the 60% and more of districts that are still all virtual. Our initial allocation of slots topped 190, which we have assigned a body to each one of those slots. Since the vaccination dates are not specific to school districts, as previously stated, but to the IU in general, we are encouraging our 190 selected educators to sign up on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday in that order, so we can minimize the number of educators out of buildings. As such, we're planning for a normal early dismissal this Thursday, a virtual asynchronous instruction on Friday and Monday. This will ensure that most, if not all, people on our list can get vaccinated and be recovered from any side effects while minimizing the impact to the educational process. This schedule will occur when phase 2 of the rollout occurs, and we can pick up the rest of CV, SOSL, and Brightville employees. And that should occur tentatively in 3 to 4 weeks. We understand the impact on families, but also know that they appreciate a planned shift to virtual rather than a last-minute closure. A special thanks to Phyllis, our 4 elementary principals, and Julie Iddings, our HR director, in helping me navigate this vaccination rollout process. So a couple changes coming up over the next week or so. Thank you, Mr. President.
Got it. Any comments from the board tonight?
Yeah, Mr. President, I have a question. I had a couple of parents ask me with the PIAA spring sports, they made a decision, I guess it was yesterday or the day before, about students and mask wearing.
Yes.
How does that work? Is that something that the governor has to approve, or is that, do they say they don't have to wear masks, so they don't have to wear them now for spring sports?
PIAA is following the governor's guidelines for sports. And in the spring, what they did is for boys lacrosse, since they have a face shield, they are exempt from wearing a mask, but they are the only sport that is exempt from wearing a mask in the spring.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Any other comments? All right, this is our first time in our meeting for public comments. All right. First on the agenda here, we're going to hear from Mr. Kramer. Mr. Kramer, you are up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just in time. Just in time for Scott. So it's nice to see everybody again. So we wanted to come out this evening and give you an update on what's happening with the market. Last time we were here, we had contemplated waiting until this summer to terminate the last remaining swap and issue the $40 million associated with it. At the time, we said, we really don't care about the direction of interest rates unless we see an opportunity. And so what's happened here recently is we've seen an opportunity with respect to the relationship that exists between the swap market and the municipal bond market. So we're gonna talk about that in a couple of slides. We'll talk about timing over the next 30 or 60 days.
Do you mind using the mic? It sort of overrides the muffle, and I know that people that are online,
Yeah,
it makes
just
it
pull it
easier
closer
for
to
them
you,
to
Scott.
hear.
Is that better?
You're gonna almost, you have to get really close.
Okay, how's that?
That's better,
Awesome.
thank you.
So page 1 of the handout is a chart that you've seen from us many times before. But if you look at the far right-hand portion of the chart in the box in blue, you'll see we've seen an uptick in interest rates over the last 3 weeks or so. And that's highlighted if you go to page 2 of the handout, where we've seen the municipal market move from about 0.75 up to just over 1%. And literally that move has been over the last 2 weeks or so. But if you turn one page forward to page 3, really what's creating the opportunity for you is the relationship that exists. If you look at the lower left-hand corner, labeled change in MMD versus UST ratio. And the second column from the left where you see 81%, 65%, 64%, 73%, and 77%. That's the relationship currently between the municipal market and the swap market. That relationship last summer, to give you an example, was 150%. The market was completely out of sorts as we got into the initial months of COVID. When we were here in November, we told you it had settled down a little bit and came back into a more normal relationship. Now the relationship has moved in your favor, where this normal relationship is probably 80 to 90%. Now the relationship is below that, and that means it's in your favor, actually gonna benefit you to terminate and issue bonds in this market. So you'll see in the next page or two that the Miller study that we've been preparing for you for the last 4 or 5 years looks better than it has. So I'm gonna first focus on columns 4 and 5. Columns 4 and 5 represent the $40 million that will terminate an issue. And then column 5, more importantly, is what's called the non-LAGUDA, non-local government unit debt act portion that we will issue to fund the termination payment on the swap. And so if you look at those two columns compared to the next page, I know it's hard to flip back and forth, but there's a benefit versus November. If you look at column 7, the bottom of column 7 today is 51,345 versus 56,730. It's a pretty significant difference in your favor just since November. Now that's a combination of two things. It's a combination of those ratios being in your favor, and it's also as interest rates go up on the taxable treasury side, that termination payment gets smaller. And so it's a combination of those two being in your favor at the moment. Treasuries have gone up, so the termination has gone down, and the relationship that exists in the municipal market is in your favor to the tune of 15 or 20%. So that's what's creating the opportunity at the moment. So a couple of things that I want to highlight as we talk about what's coming up over the next 30 or 60 days. Clearly, we want to move forward with the termination and issuing the $40 million of debt and the additional debt needed to terminate the swap. In addition to that, we have always contemplated another cleanup issue at the end. We've authorized $110 million in total for projects. So we want you to be thinking about what else, in addition to the $40 million, we want to issue now, pull forward to take advantage of the current municipal market that's in your favor. And so what this page shows is column 3, getting an additional $10 million in capital projects. And so we don't need to decide that tonight, but we want you to be thinking about that between now and next month's meeting. So we would issue the $40 million, which would be the cleanup issue for the middle school, Brownstown, and then I know there's a laundry list of other things that you're considering. So we want you to think about that over the next probably 30 days or so. The last page of the handout is page 6, just some benchmarks. We would like to come back with your bond counsel to next month's meeting, take any action needed because I don't believe we actually have a resolution in place for the non-Laguda portion of the debt, the swap termination debt. So if there's any action that we need to take, Donna would be here at that meeting with a resolution to take action to terminate the swap and to issue the non-Laguda debt. At the same time, we'll be working with Adele and Phyllis in preparing the offering document, preparing the rating agency presentation, so that hopefully by the time we get to next month's meeting, not too long after, we'll be in a position to lock up interest rates and move towards closing. So I know that's a lot, and there's a lot of numbers as I typically share with you. But clearly you can see the difference in those two millage studies is very much in your favor at the moment, so we wanted to bring that opportunity to you. Others around you are doing the same. Pequot Valley is in the middle of a pretty significant battle for weight loss, but also issuing bonds for their capital project. So they were originally contemplating roughly a $90 million project. They were gonna issue 35 to 40 million this year. They pulled forward and issued 60 million to take advantage of the current rate environment. A lot of other districts around you are doing the same. Governor Mifflin right up the road. So timing is good to take advantage of these rates. So with that, I'll pause and answer any questions that you might have. Otherwise, we'll come back to next month's meeting with those action items. I think your architect is here. My sense is you're gonna wanna talk through those remaining projects. We think it's to your advantage to, while those remaining projects that are on the list are probably larger than 10 million, so maybe you get 5 or 10, whatever that number is, we ought to add it while we're paying the freight of doing the 40 million at the moment. We can decide that at next month's meeting.
Questions for Scott while he's here for it?
So if we locked in, what would be the interest rate? 3,
Yep, so if you look at the first millage study at the bottom, you're locking up an arbitrage yield of roughly 1.5% today. 1.5% to 2%.
that's okay.
Yep.
Yeah. The biggest thing is, Phil's correct me if I'm wrong, but we can't take out all the money and not spend it, correct?
Correct.
You have to be spending as you go.
In 3 years.
In 3 years?
3 years.
That's enough.
So that would,
Is that one, is that all in?
Yeah.
Is that all in?
Yeah.
Okay. Last time we did this, it was last time when we locked it in, was it 3.5, 3.25-ish?
the first 10 million may have.
Yeah.
So we were locked in the hedged piece. I don't have the rate for what the swaps are hedged at. Maybe Phyllis.
It was still low.
Yeah, it's low.
A low rate. Now it's lower, is what you're saying.
So, yes and no. So what's gonna be lower is the unhedged piece, whatever you choose for these other cleanup projects, the 10 or 15 million that you're gonna talk about between now. The $40 million is hedged and locked in at a fixed interest rate. What's to your advantage is the cash flow that you see on that millage study is going to be better because the relationship between the swap market and the cash market is favorable. So not only, let's just assume that the rate's 2.5%. You've locked that in with the interest rate swap. Now you're probably gonna be the beneficiary of issuing that debt at roughly a cost of 2.35 because of that relationship that exists.
Okay.
We've told you many times, we don't care about the direction of interest rates because
Yep.
you're hedged.
Yep.
But here, your hedge is working in your favor. Yep.
You just gotta pull the trigger on it.
Right, so last summer, we didn't want to terminate because the relationship was not in your favor.
Yeah.
It came back to normal, and now it's moved, the pendulum has swung completely in your favor. Completely in your favor. That was close.
So if you're gonna execute, you need to execute now, is what you're saying.
Right, yes.
All right.
We don't expect the relationship to last very long.
No,
Diane, can
probably
you
not.
call Mr. Craig?
Bill, I knew as soon as I put it close to me, it was gonna end badly.
Can't talk without his hands, so.
Right,
Good.
Yep.
No.
Thanks, Scott.
you're welcome. We'll see you next month.
Alrighty. Mr. West, you're up.
Hello, good evening. I have 3 change orders this evening to present to you across a variety of disciplines. The first one is we remediated another sinkhole. I think this makes number 3 for us, at a cost of $1,405.62. I will note, we are tracking 2 others just for the board's information. We'll see where they fall. We have an HVAC contractor change order. It is a credit associated with the bases for the pump, removing what we call inertia bases with isolators and just doing grout. Those were originally specified for acoustics, and looking at that a little more detailed, they are located on the ground floor. We're not as worried about vibration because that vibration is simply going to go into the earth. It's not going to vibrate the structure and disrupt occupants. And then finally, we have one that we'll see throughout the project. Per the specification, the electrical contractor is responsible for the utilities associated with the construction activities. So we have what I would call a temporary meter, a construction meter. Mike Cast, who some of you know is the on-site for Abacus, does a meter reading every month. And in your packet, you'll see a spreadsheet that Ken and Phyllis and I worked out. Ken provided the utility bills for Constellation and PP&L. And that simply takes that rate and applies it to the meter reading. So we'll total it up every 3 months and bring it to the board as a credit. Just to make sure the district is, I'll say, whole. It is, you've paid it in your utility bill. It's not what I would call true construction credit, but that's how we're rectifying it on the books. Yes, thank you, Todd. So there it is. As some of you may know, you have 2. You have the PP&L and the Constellation rate. This takes into account that. And the meter rate is that 3rd column. So you can see how it's gone up. Obviously, as construction activity has increased. And it will probably continue to go up for a bit until it levels off. We get some of the heavy lifting done with the steel erection and whatnot. So that's what I have for you this month. Total credit of $7,125.72. Are there any questions I can answer?
So basically, you're saying with the electricity, we're taking money from the construction fund to pay our electric bill that's gone up because of the construction activity.
Yes, I mean, per the specification, they're responsible for it. This is just the easiest way. Instead of them trying to write Phyllis a check, every month to
Right.
cover their share of the bill, this was the easiest way we could think of to handle it. Thank you.
Thanks, Wes.
Have a good evening.
All right, Phyllis.
Okay, so we're gonna do a couple of policies tonight. If you looked at your policy review schedule and thought we were only doing 2, we are technically only doing 2 types of policies. What happened with I'm gonna do the 810s first. What happened with the 810s is in talking with the School Boards Association through the Policy Review Service, and again, this is a policy that we have not updated in a while, there were a number of changes. And one of the things that they're recommending is pulling a couple of pieces of the policy out and making them sub-policies. It's interesting to me, sometimes we do that and sometimes we seem to go back from that. Food service, for example, had the lunch charges policy that was broken out, and the new recommendation is to put it back within the policy. So, the items that we're pulling out are items that we had smaller sections in our old 810 policy, but with the new language, it does make it a little bit long. So starting with 810, 810 is really a rewrite of our old policy. And the 2 things that we decided that we're going to do is when we looked at our existing policy versus the PSBA template, is what Dr. Z has before you on the screen, the use of personal vehicles and then the use of district vehicles were 2 sections that were not in the PSBA model. So things that we had decided once upon a time that were important for us to have in our policy. I did talk to Davelyn Smeltzer at PSBA and kind of walk through this with her. And so we sort of did it on the phone together and talked about, how it made sense for us to take those items and add them into our policy. So she was comfortable kind of with, our process there and what we did. So hopefully you don't have too many questions, but what this one should then do is line us up very nicely with the policy manual. So then, as I mentioned, breaking out two policies, so 810.1 is, so when PSBA did this, they actually had two separate policies. One was for if you had district-run, district-owned buses and district employed bus drivers, and the other one was for if you were contracted. Now, it gets a little bit confusing because there's also an 818 policy that deals specifically with contracted services. We're gonna get there in a couple of meetings. We don't need to do anything with it right now, but just know that when we get there, our 818 policy is actually much more condensed because of kind of how we're doing some of this work here. So again, in talking through it with Dave Lynn, we didn't need to have both of those policies for the obvious reason that we're contracted with Brightville. So we were able to take both of those policies and sort of cobble them together into just one sub-policy that deals really just with drivers. And you'll notice there's some specific language in there about, and it's really intended to hold the contractor's feet to the fire, so to speak, to make sure that they have a drug and alcohol policy in place, that if somebody has an accident, they're going to deal with it, make the person get tested, take whatever disciplinary action that they need to, and then also make sure that there is, there's actually language in there about texting, so drivers can't be texting while they're driving a school vehicle, those sorts of things. So this particular policy just deals with the drug and alcohol piece, and then if we want to go to 810.2. And I did actually ask Dave Lynn about this one as well, because we did have some language in our old policy on video recording, although there's been some case law since we put that policy in place. There wasn't enough meat in our existing paragraph, so we were gonna have to change that anyway. And the PSBA's point of view is that this is a required policy, because I was sort of back and forth with her about can't we just add it into the regular 810 and be done with it, and her recommendation was that we keep this one separate. So I think one thing it'll be easier if we needed to change something. So Mrs. Graff caught a missing word in that one, so we fixed that up, so that one should be good to go. So again, you thought maybe you were doing 810, we're doing 3 policies, but I feel comfortable that now we're going to be up to speed with everything that we need to have in place. Any other questions?
Does this mean our motion next week will be to void policy 808?
I'm gonna get to that one in a minute. These are just the 810s.
Okay.
Yeah, let me
Okay, I'm
backtrack to
sorry.
that one.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Go ahead.
Do you have anybody have any questions on 810, 810.1, 810.2? No, okay. So back to Mrs. Graff's question. I know I kind of skipped over that. It seemed like it was easier to kind of do all these together. The other policy then, 808, for whatever reason, we used to call our defibrillator policy. Other districts don't do it that way, and they sort of grab the defibrillator and the CPR, put them together. And so when we looked at the detail of this policy, I know Dr. Mead had asked me last month, feels like it was last week, about some language that we had in one of the policies I presented being very detailed. Well, if you looked at this policy, it was very detailed. So in working with Nancy Lopez at the high school, obviously she's the nurse coordinator, we took a look at this and we took a look at a couple of samples. We looked at Manheim Township was one, I'm forgetting, Warrior Run I think was another one, and saw that our policy really went into guidelines and procedures. So in talking with Nancy, we're gonna keep what's in 808, we're just not gonna keep it in a policy, we're gonna put it into the administrative guidelines. And so to answer your question, yes, we will be recommending deletion of 808 and then addition of 822, which is the number that other districts are using, again, lining us up with the PSBA manual, to have the defibrillator, the AED, and the CPR together. Again, Nancy and I looked at this policy last week and we're comfortable. We actually took some bits and pieces of the two that we looked at. I think we have a good broader policy in place that will enable us to do all the things that we need to do. The only change that we made to the PSBA guidance was that the training is not annual. It's every other year. So we did make that change on Nancy's recommendation to just reflect that it's every other year, not every year. So hopefully clean that one up a little bit, get us in a good spot there. Any questions on kind of what we're gonna do with 808 and 822?
Do we have sufficient number of staff who are willing to do this training? I know there were times when, especially with CPR, we had trouble having staff that we keep up with.
I can ask her, but I have not heard any
Okay, good.
concern about, and the AEDs, I mean, the way the new ones are now are really like, they talk to you and tell you how to do it, so. And there is language in the policy that, anyone can sort of pick it up and do it with
I
the
think it's
instruction.
the CPR part of it that we often had trouble getting people willing to keep up with.
Well, and that's gotten a lot more simplistic too. It's all about the chest compressions instead of, having, I think people used to get nervous about when do I breathe and how many counts and now it's so focused on chest compressions that, I think that's gotten a little bit easier for people to undertake.
Yeah, they changed the guidelines for chest compressions.
Okay,
Thanks, Phyllis.
you are welcome. No,
Nope.
I'm coming back though, okay.
Yes, you are. Dr. Z.
Yeah, this is something that Kelly just handed off to me before she left. It's, we use Ms. Murray for parental consulting. We used to do it face-to-face, but now with COVID, we're doing it virtually this year. It is being paid out of Title I funds. It is posted on the website, so it is available and accessible to the parents.
How's attendance since we're virtual? Sometimes
I don't know, I'll double check and
sometimes
see how
it
many
causes
hits.
attendance to go up because it's more convenient.
So Josh, I'll get with you and see if we can access how many times that site was accessed. Thank you.
Because we may want to consider retaining a certain level of that.
Right, it is often easier for parents,
Yes.
especially parents that are tentative to come in the first place for help.
Back to Phyllis.
Yeah, I guess I should have just hung out here. Next two items on your agenda are also mine. So if you remember, there are a number of assessment appeals that we are in court over at this point, because the Board of Assessment Appeal had ruled not in our favor, so we're pursuing those. And really, how we proceed on these is gonna obviously depend on how the appraisals come out. So if you remember with this particular one, there was a conflict with Barley Snyder. Bob Frankhauser suggested Apple, Yost, and Z. So Bob Hollinger, so I have the same first name, so it's been sort of easy. It suggested that we get an appraisal on this one. He's not gonna do the full-fledged appraisal, which would obviously cost more than the price that you see on this. He's gonna review. There was a fairly detailed appraisal submitted with the appeal. So he's going to review that one, and then we're gonna have a conversation and figure out whether it's enough that, he can just sort of give us a verbal, or whether we wanna see a written review, a written report basically on it. The property value is sizable enough that it makes sense for us to do this one. And so we will put this on consent for you next week to approve. And Bob Hallinger will work with them to get it done, and then I'll be back and tell you how we're gonna proceed.
Could you refresh my memory? Excuse me, a few months ago, we were also approving solicitors for something related to assessments. I couldn't find it, but I remember there was one. I don't know if it was a review of an assessment or. Do you remember what that one was?
The only other thing that I can think of was you approved for Apple, Yost, and Z.
Okay, I couldn't find the names, I didn't remember,
Yep.
and I kept, I know a lot of these solicitors are very specialized. I just wondered how this differed from what that was.
Yeah, this is actually, that was for legal counsel for
Yeah.
Bob Hollinger.
Yeah,
This is for the appraisal.
okay, same case.
Yes,
Oh,
same
okay.
case.
Got a lot of lawyers involved in this, don't we?
Well, Bob Frankhauser can't be involved, so we
Yeah.
really only have one lawyer.
Yeah.
Just the firm has 3 names, I
Okay.
guess, so.
I just wondered if it was the same one.
It is, yep.
Okay.
And then the next item on the agenda, so we had talked about this, oh my goodness, maybe a year ago. Feels like it's about that long ago. Looking at some opportunities for legacy types of things for folks. If you remember back to when we did the Buckskin Capital campaign, there were some naming rights along with that and kind of resurrecting that idea as we looked at the project list that Scott Kramer mentioned that we're gonna have in front of us. And first out of the gate, no surprise, the foundation was interested. They actually were interested in the primary makerspace labs that are going in the elementary schools. And so they actually, not this past year, last year or the year before, did their extraordinary give campaign based upon raising money toward that. Want to have the naming rights to name the lab after Bev Brenizer, who I'm sure you know was principal here, as well as a executive director for the foundation. And so they have raised $100,000. They're gonna split it across the 4 elementary schools, $25,000 to each. But we're doing one agreement. So we were sort of back and forth. The foundation met a couple of weeks ago and decided instead of doing 4 $25,000 ones for each building, they're just gonna do $100,000. And we'll sort of work out when the money is coming to us. So they're already sent us the money for Brownstown. As the other buildings come forward, then they will send us the money. We'll kind of, work with Dr. Huskin to get that result. So it'll be nice for us because we will be able to buy the furniture and any equipment that's needed in those labs for the students to be able to work in those spaces. So the foundation board is fine with this agreement. Bob Frankhauser is fine with this agreement. So you just need to be fine with this agreement, which for those of you who've been here from the prior campaign, it's gonna look really familiar to you because we took a lot of the same language because it's sort of the same concept and same intent. It's just a different list of things that will be able to be named because certainly with the timing, the things that were already named are already named after people. So
This is money we were going to spend anyhow, I mean, something we were putting in these schools anyway.
well, there was some money in the furniture, fixtures and equipment budget for the school to be able, obviously to buy furniture, fixtures and equipment. But I would say that the amount of money that we would have had to spend, this enables us to do more than what we would do otherwise.
Okay. My other thing is, I know it's great working with the foundation. Unlike some of our arrangements, this is light on specifics, which I assume they're not fussy about, like, they're not in on what the naming, it talks about once the naming is affixed. They're leaving that to us to design and make as appropriate as we see fit.
The actual plaque itself,
Yes.
yeah, we actually have a draft of that and we can attach it and show it to you what it looks like.
That's not all part of it. And my last thing is, and this is just my personal opinion, I'm often a bit put off when we use the term memorial. For me, that has a sad, almost pejorative thing. I wonder if they would consider just naming it after her, without the word memorial.
I can certainly take that
I
back to
mean,
them.
I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but.
That was their wording, not our wording.
Sometimes that's everyone's initial reaction, that this is a memorial, but the word itself, I know, I go crazy about hospitals that are memorial hospitals.
I can certainly
Yeah, we
take
can
that back to
definitely
them.
talk to Dr. Huskin
Yeah.
about that.
I mean,
Sure.
they have a right to name it as they see fit, but I'd like them to consider that.
Any other
I
questions?
think Bev would be more, she was so alive and so vivacious. I hate to put that word on her name.
Just her name and lab, correct? Just her name and lab.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, we good? All right.
All right, board, I'm next. So, obviously, we have a letter of resignation from Mr. Smucker. That's why the seat is empty there. I need a motion to declare that seat open.
So moved.
Second.
Roll calls, we're gonna do roll call with this, we'll start with Dana.
Aye.
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 And I. And as you all saw, from district communication, there is information out there for people to submit applications and resumes, so we'll be discussing in exec session dates and
Would you
everything.
remind me, is that deadline what's the deadline?
Twenty-second is the deadline.
Excuse me?
The 22nd of March is the
22nd.
deadline. So we're waiting on applications and resumes to come in for us to have a conversation about how. So, moving on here, board, you can see the tentative agenda for the March 15th meeting in front of you. This is our second time in the meeting for public comments. Seeing no public. Continue on, any board matters tonight? All right, hearing none, board, I will take a motion to adjourn to executive session.
Do we have the open committee assignments?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Skipped right over that one, that was my bad. We did talk about that, and we put it out there, and, Dana came forward and took some of the spots from, that John vacated. The most, no offense, Dana, probably the most critical one was the CTC representative, and Diane has agreed. Diane and Lisa kind of fought about it, it got ugly for a while, I had to calm it down. But Diane won, so Diane is gonna be the
She's calling to me.
Everybody's calling me.
Oh, hey, all right. So Diane is gonna take the CTC representative. There's some other ones there that Mr. Smucker fills, but they're not standalone, so we can kind of help maybe the new person that fills that seat to fill in some of those other spots. But I think the major one was the CTC, so. So,
Just one thing I have.
Yep.
I noticed on the agenda for next consent agenda is that we're locking in graduation. I'm just starting to get some inquiries from seniors. What's graduation gonna look like this year, et cetera. I know we're not ready there yet,
We are not there yet.
but I know we're not there yet.
Yep.
We just wanna let you know that word's
oh, it's out there.
out.
Oh, without a doubt.
So-
And our goal is to have it in church. And then we have to develop plan B, C, and D.
As usual.
I would assume the same goes for prom, because we're
Yes,
preparing for all of it.
that's out there as
That's
well.
true.
Prom is the same thing. All districts have been in communication with their host facility, and their hands are tied right now as well. Right now, we are at the Eden, and it just went up to 75%, or it's not 75%, 75 people can attend. And then social distancing, so that wipes out dancing. So it's gonna be a very interesting progression as we move forward.
Certainly.
Same issue with the social
What if it's all
distancing.
slow music, would that help?
Again, Mike, Dr. Smith is doing a great job working with the
Sure.
student council to try to find answers for us.
All right, board, so I will take a motion to adjourn to executive session for legal and personnel reasons.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we are adjourned.